Hello?
Hi, Caroline. Sorry about this.
Me
Can you hear me,
too.
Caroline?
Yes, I can.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How are you keeping?
I'm very well,
Not too
thanks.
bad, not too bad.
Good.
We haven't Jimmy Hagan is on the line with me here.
Hi,
Okay.
Caroline.
Hi. Nice to talk to you too.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, Caroline, I've given a big build-up to you anyway, so the delay might have worked in your favour.
Okay. So are we actually on the air right now?
We're on air.
Okay. Wonderful.
Sorry about the confusion. We must have mixed up the time a little bit.
That's all right.
It doesn't matter anyway. We're very relaxed people in this station anyway.
Okay.
Our blood pressures go up a little bit now and again.
So tell me where
relaxed.
tell me where you want to begin, and I'll let you decide where you want the conversation to go.
Well, tell us all a bit about yourself first. Tell us about Carolyne Van Der Meer. Okay, your forebears are from Holland, right?
Absolutely.
And tell us what got you to write Motherlode. And you're a mother of one, married, living in Quebec, is it?
Yes, I live in Montreal. And maybe we should start by saying that I've become very attached to Ireland because of my visit in 2011.
Right.
And
it was great to see you there.
It was very nice to come, and I'm sure you'll recall that it was Michael Ferry who invited me. And so I came to a Boyneberry's launch. And since then I've been kind of I've developed attachments with all kinds of Irish poets, yourself included. And that's been a really enriching experience. So I've gotten a lot of support.
It was lovely to meet you there.
Oh, well, thank you.
It was lovely to meet you there. Yeah,
likewise.
Super. It was super. We all had a big chat that night afterwards. And great fun.
Me too.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I should say that where Motherlode is concerned, I've gotten a lot of support from my Irish fellow writers, and that's meant a lot to me. But as for Motherlode, it's I don't know if you've mentioned anything in on air before or prefaced our interview with anything. So I guess I'll just start at the beginning.
Yes, well, I have mentioned a bit about it now. I did say something there as we came on. I'll tell you what I've got, right? I'll just give you what I've got, right? And then you can take it up from there, okay?
Okay.
Motherlode is documents. You found out that your mother's parents in Holland, where they came from, were involved with the Dutch resistance.
Correct.
And they hid a number of Jews on an ongoing basis under their floorboards in their house. Her father was involved with the Dutch resistance, blowing up bridges and sending code messages and making fake IDs and smuggling people in and out. And there was always risk. He was a shoemaker by profession. And what you have done is you have documented the thing from the very start, firstly with diary entries of where you start your, shall we say, odyssey, and you have documented the whole thing, including what you found out in prose, in diary entries, in stories. You wrote stories from your mother's point of view as a child and as all through the war and experiencing the bombing and the food shortages. And, because of the way you did it, and the poems in particular, you give out an awful lot of information without seeming to. You give out a huge amount of information, and it makes the whole thing very real. And I mean, I didn't quite expect what I got when I started reading it. It was quite a book.
Well, thank you.
Something to be really proud of. A really fantastic piece of work.
Thank you, James.
You take it up from there.
I must say that I think you should become my publicist. I think that's the best resume of my book I've ever heard. Thank you very much.
Good.
Where do I go from there? Let's see. I went to Holland in 2010. Part of the genesis of the book was to go visit my mother's childhood home, as you know, because it's that part of the story is documented too. And it was quite an experience to discover. You know, I heard these stories as a child, right? But I heard them very superficially. My mother was 7 when the war ended, so her memories were they weren't very deep. Like, she had superficial memories of the things that she lived through. And of course, you know, once I decided to write the book and she agreed to help me, I started to dig really deep, and that was really, really painful for her. But to actually go to her house in Holland was really quite an experience, because all of my childhood I'd heard these stories and I'd seen the picture, which is on the front of Motherlode, but I hadn't really believed it in a way. You know, like, you don't really believe something until you see it with your own eyes, because it's so infused with your own idea of what it should be. So when I went there, it was really inspiring. And I also did research there at a number of museums, which was a bit sort of impromptu. Like, I didn't go to Holland with the idea of going to this museum or that museum and to talk to this person or that person. I kind of did it on the fly. I wanted to just see the house and see where that would take me.
And the owner of the house was actually turned out to be Canadian.
Yes, it was very funny, because the thing about the little village where my mom lived is that nobody really speaks English there. Like, it's so close to the German border that, and they speak such a dialect in that part of Holland that it's not commonplace. You know, like, when you go to Amsterdam, everybody speaks English. You don't have to be able to speak Dutch at all. And so I was really lucky. Like, had I gone to the house and the man's wife was, if he had not been home and it had just been his wife, I wouldn't have been able to have the conversation that I had with him, because she didn't speak any English. And he, in fact, you know, I visited with him for a couple of hours, and then he left for a meeting. So it could have very well been that I'd arrived and he wasn't home. So it was all kind of serendipitous for me. You know, the fact that I was able to go into the house and sit in the backyard. I sat in the backyard with him and had a cup of coffee, and was able to imagine my mother running through that backyard when she was a very little girl, and, you know, there were bombers overhead strafing, and her father had given her strict instructions to dive to her tummy, and she didn't listen, and she kept running. And so what I was thinking when I was sitting in the backyard was, this is where that happened. And it was, truly. And so it was quite inspiring to go there. Now, I had already started the book, but I didn't really know what shape it was going to take. And going to the house was the big push. It was truly the moment of great inspiration.
It was, and I'll tell you what, you found out, like, you were only there for a relatively short space, on something like 5 days, wasn't it? And you got so much information, I couldn't believe it. Like, for instance, you went with the illusion that everyone in Holland was doing what your parents were doing, but they were far from it. They actually, 104,000 Jews actually were murdered during the occupation.
Dutch Jews.
And Holland had the highest rate of handing people over.
It did.
To any country.
Which is shocking, right?
Parents were exceptional. Yeah.
Yes.
Parents were exceptional.
And the thing about that was,
your father.
Pardon?
Sorry, I quote your father. He said, "As Christians, it is our duty to help those who are being hunted." You wrote that down in your book, wasn't that correct?
Yes, I did. That was it was my mum who said that. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Lovely sentiment. Sorry, I'm cutting across you too much.
No, that's okay. Well, you know, the thing about that trip to Holland was that I'm a journalist by trade, right? So my habit is to just talk to everybody. I'm like on an information-seeking mission, even if I'm just being social, you know? So everybody I talked to, from storekeepers to bus drivers to, the maitre d' in the hotel, I was trying get a sense of as much as I could. And it was a really, yes, you're right, I was only there a relatively short time, only 5 days, and I just sort of sponged up the information and tried to turn it into something that would be easy for people to get into. And the thing that I say in Motherlode, which you'll probably remember, is that it's not a history book. It's not about history, it's about feelings. Because why would I write another history book? It's been done and done and done again. And, you know, what the Dutch lived during the occupation, you know, it's not a great subject that's written about when you look up books about World War II. You know, everybody's writing out battles and strategy, and certainly the Holocaust, of course, but you know, the day-to-day lives of these people, just the everyday people, you don't find so much about that, especially when you're really just trying to look at emotions. And so that's kind of what I felt I could do, because I couldn't. I'm not a historian, and I didn't want to pretend that I didn't want to try to be one. I'm not trained to be one. So I wanted to do it in a way that I could do it, you know, and for me that was to employ poetry and short stories. And the journal entries, I must say, were a last, they were added at the end. When I submitted the book to the publisher, the journal entries were not part of it. And the editor, the acquisitions editor, said, you know, something's missing to hold all this together, to kind of explain why you've done it this way. And so I said to her, well, I have these journal entries, you know, and I decided not to include them. And she's like, no, that's what we want. So I prepared them, and it took quite a while to get them in shape, because of course, you know, when you're writing a journal, you're including all kinds of reflections that are not necessarily for public consumption. And so I had to take some of those things out and get the focus in the right place. And when I submitted them, the publisher was like, okay.
It worked out seamless. Yeah, it did. And like in between, you give details. Like I'm skipping here now, but you one of the things you have about you give just the data you give is at a Polish labour camp near Wilshofen in Germany, about soldiers that came, you know, just to give a sense of what the end was like, and 300 mere skeletons greeted his regiment from the prison camp, left for dead among the rotting corpses. So it must have been horrific. You know,
absolutely.
You know, you give about details about the food shortages. At one stage, you say about I think it was a poem about a walnut tree, and you say how they were your mother and her friends were caught stealing walnuts from a walnut tree at the back of a house that had been taken over by the German, and they were caught by a German officer, and he said, "Go ahead and take all the walnuts you want." And then she said, your mother said she remembered thinking how nice the Germans were. And then the following week, I think they rounded up a load of saboteurs and shot them all in the public square. And she never thought the same again. You know?
No, exactly. I want to point out that, James, you know, you've read my book very closely, clearly, because you're quoting things so perfectly. It's wonderful. But I want to point out to the listeners that Motherlode was not, like, about a third of the book is my mother's story. The poem that you're referring to is actually, I interviewed three other people who are about the same age as my mom, a little older, so their memories were a little stronger. And I also interviewed a Canadian Jewish soldier. So he was a soldier during the war. And he told me his perspective on liberating Holland, which was very interesting because he's a Jewish soldier. And there were quite a few other people that I ran into or met up with just like that in Amsterdam, and I spoke to other bits of information that sort of came my way that inspired poetry. So about a third of the book is about my mom, and the other 2/3 are about these other people that I spoke with. And the poem that you just mentioned about the walnut tree is about a woman who lives just a couple of hours outside Montreal, who was 5 years older than my mom, and she has very strong memories of of her childhood during the war. And she lived in a different part of Holland, not in a tiny village on the German border, but in Nijmegen, which is the place, the movie A Bridge Too Far is the story of that city. You remember that movie, maybe?
I do, yeah, I do indeed.
So the book kind of describes, the reason I did that was because my mom's story just simply wasn't, it couldn't fill a whole book. Because the war, when she was 7 when the war ended, and there was only, and as I got going, that's what I realized. Okay, this is really good, but I don't have enough. So I put a call. It was suggested to me to reach out to an organization in Montreal here, actually, a Montreal chapter of a national organization that is called the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Nederlandic Study. And the then chapter president sent out my request to everybody on his mailing list and said, are there any of you out there who would be interested in talking to Carolyne? And a number of people got in touch with me, and I ended up interviewing 3 of them in depth, plus interviewing this former soldier that I mentioned. His name is David Kousser. And David Kousser is actually a very well-known Canadian artist. His stuff is in Canadian museums and probably in the States as well. He is known for doing tiny, tiny miniature guns. Like, right. It's amazing. I was at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts last week, and his pieces are in there. So he's 90, and he's an artist in his own right. And he told me his story one evening over a 3-hour interview, and he'd never told his family what had happened to him during the war. Right. The story of him liberating that Polish work camp was the first time he'd ever told it.
Oh, could you read a couple of pieces?
Would you like me to read anything specific, James?
Well, pick one yourself. I mean, there's a few ones that I did mark that's I don't know if these are one. The Walnut Tree was one of them.
Okay, I can read that.
Advice, the hiding place, maybe.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and the hunting game was another one.
Okay, hang on, let me just find them. Do you have the page open?
I don't.
Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can find it here quickly. I don't want to.
Sorry about that. No, take your time. We're not panicking.
I know. Thank you.
We have
okay.
just so we know, like our following guest has agreed to. He's coming on a little bit later, so he doesn't mind hanging in. So we're fine.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. That's good. Thanks very much for that. Tell him thanks very much for that. What time have we got till?
I don't know. We have to wait until I can get in touch with Vin again, because Vin's gone.
You just interject at any time, and I'm perfectly comfortable whenever we have to stop. It's great. I'm so glad to be on your show, and whatever works for you.
Yeah. Can we go till half, Jimmy?
I believe so. Yeah. As long as we have permission to, as long as we're okay to go on a half an hour extra, so that we can get the next story out.
Yeah.
I think everything's fine, guys. Who was supposed to be up next?
I sent you a contact there, Vin. Did you get it?
Oh no, sorry.
That's Vin, by the way, Carolyne. He's in charge of the station.
There. Sean, is it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello there.
Hi. Yeah. Well, once Sean adds me, I'll pull him in. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll sort it out in the meantime. So we carry on as we are just for now, because we have our guest doesn't mind.
No problem.
Okay.
All right then. So just give me a sign.
All is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So James, I'll go ahead and I'll read The Walnut Tree.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. The Walnut Tree. We wanted those walnuts, rare treats, growing on a tree behind the house, commissioned by the Germans. On the way home from school, we'd sneak into the garden, pick nuts from the tree, crack their shells, hurriedly dig out the meat. One day we froze as we noticed a German officer looking down on us. We waited for his anger. Instead, in low tones, he told us to come back any time. We thought how nice these German soldiers are. 2 days later, they rounded up Dutch saboteurs and shot them in the street.
I could see that might change our humour. Let's see, what else have you got? Motherlode, that was the main poem.
Okay, I'll do that.
Title track.
Hold on. Getting there. All right. Motherlode. Sluftweg 102, De Krim, Overijssel. Flatlands, farm country, waterways, tree lines. Train speeding me back in time to this quiet village, barely awake. I walk along the dike, thinking of the boy who stuck his finger in, legend, like my mother's house, until today. Its facade, triangular with 2 windows upstairs, 2 larger ones at ground level, looks like a face with wide eyes and a large mouth, expressions and words, stories to tell. Once a butchery and a shoemaking shop, now home to a family of 6. Front room divided by need, PlayStation and TV on one side, hearth and soft leather sofas on the other. No trace of her life, no visible false ceiling, no frame around untold stories. And obviously my idea there is that now the book is the frame around the stories and they're told.
Yes, amazing stuff.
Any others that you'd like to request?
Where do we see now? There was one about shrapnel where they were collecting shrapnel. I'm not sure, was that a poem?
Yeah,
the collection, I think it's called.
The collection. Okay, here we go. Yeah. This was actually, again, the woman that I was telling you about who lives a couple of hours outside of Montreal. Her name is Libby Boland-Emond, and this is one of her memories. The collection. We imagined the explosions, how they deformed the metal, made them into works of art. We had a contest to see who could collect the most unusual pieces, shape, length, sharpness. This was war, benign behind the front lines, until the day the Allied forces launched an air attack on our town. Column of German soldiers walking our street, noise of car and truck engines drowning out the roar of air raid sirens. Grandfather screaming at us to get inside, seek cover in the sub-basement. When it was over, he let us come up, but he wouldn't let us go outside. Bits of bodies littered the street. Afterwards, we threw out our pieces, never looked for shrapnel again.
Yeah, very poignant indeed. And last one, the hiding place, which I thought was most descriptive of where they were hidden and how they were hidden.
Yes, this is the story that I most heard when I was a kid. So there was a false floor between the first and second floors of the house, which of course, I visited the floor and visited the house and spent a long time looking at the ceiling thinking, is it still there? I did ask the owner and he had, no clue about the false floor. Clearly it had been taken out at some point or other. Yeah. But this idea of this false floor really got my imagination going even as a small child.
Yeah.
So here we go, the hiding place. And I should say too that one of the things I really tried to do when I wrote this book was imagine, truly get into the heads of all of the possible characters in these stories. Imagine what they felt like. The hiding place. It's small. I scramble in, lie down, and she covers me. Layers of cowhide, tanned and tangy. The smell crowds my nostrils. I will throw up. My sweat, absorbed by the leather, stinks more. How many before me have lain like this? Big boots, coming up the stairs, they walk over me. I hold my breath. I want to scream, I don't dare, I want out of here. What if I die, and what if they forget all about me? Boots on the stairs again, going down. Door closes. I hear soft footsteps. Hear the floor slide away. Feel the leather panels lifting.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could imagine. You could imagine the fear.
Exactly.
With the big boots clambering over them. Yeah. You could well imagine. My own grandfather, I remember, he came out to look at a column of black and tans. They were the British that time. When they were passing by his house, and they basically told him to fall in, and they took him off. And they weren't too sure if he'd be coming back again, but he did come back alive, but they thought they were going to take him off and shoot him or lock him up, So that was at the time of the occupation. But tell us this, you said it brought your mother and you closer, or it gave you a better understanding of her when you had finished. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
And, I could see how it would.
It was a bittersweet thing, right? Because my mother didn't really want to do it. She she buried these memories so deep, and it was almost like she forgot that part of her life very willingly, right? She's a very sensitive person. She's someone who I think is quite anxious, and she's 77 now. No, she's 78. She when we did this together, she found that she was reliving it when she had managed to push it so far away, and it was a big sacrifice for her. And I actually feel I feel like she's given me an enormous gift, because she gave me the pathway to my first book.
Yeah.
And not only that, she's given a gift to her own family. I mean, their memories are preserved. And, my son now knows the story. And as you'll recall, James, part of what pushed me to write this book was my son asking me questions. My mom goes by the Dutch word for grandma, so that's oma. And my son would say to me, what really happened to Oma during the war? What did her family do again? And I would tell the same superficial stories that I had heard, just the basics, like they hid Jews, my grandfather was in the resistance, but I didn't myself really know what that meant. I mean, I knew what it meant, I knew that it was a huge thing, but I had no real understanding of the depth of the emotions that would go with that. And so this exercise of going through all these stories with my mother was traumatic for her, but it also made me understand why she's anxious as a 78-year-old. And I think it's because these things shape you. You're 7 years old when the war is over, and you've basically started your life hearing bombs exploding. Like, how can you not be anxious forever?
Yes, because she was very young at the time when it started, as I recall. From the picture, anyway, she seemed very young. What age was she when it was over? Well, she was 11. 7. She was 11.
No, 7.
Oh, 7?
7.
Right. Oh, that was very young. Yeah.
Very young. So yes, it's made us a lot closer, because I think when you understand someone better, you can look past, mother-daughter relationships, I think, can be very fraught, and I think I probably was a lot, maybe not so tolerant of different things as I got older, and through my teenage years, like all teenagers are with their parents. And, really getting a deep understanding of my mother made me feel very differently about, made me understand why she became who she is today. Yes. And it also made me see what kind of sacrifices she was willing to make to give me this opportunity to write a book.
What age were they? Did they come over to Canada? Also, your grandparents, or not?
Yes. My mom, they came over in the early 50s. My mom came over in 1953. She was 15.
Right.
So she came over with her parents and the rest of the big brood of children. I mean, there were nine children in my mom's family.
Right. I had a big brood of mine as well. I had 10, so there you go. I bet you I won. But no TV. But sorry. You came over. Let's see. What age were they when they died?
When my grandparents died?
Or are they still alive?
No. My grandmother died in before I was 3, I think. So she must have died in the early 70s. I can't remember the exact date. My grandfather died in 1984.
Right.
So I can't remember my grandfather's age when he died. My grandmother was quite young. She had stomach cancer and died. I think she was 54 or so. So she's quite young.
Yeah. They were quite. And it might be pointed out that they were actually Christians. Like they weren't Jewish or anything. They just did it because of they saw it as their Christian duty. Like it was a big, dangerous thing to do in those days. Absolutely. And can you imagine, even for a second, how I can't imagine how much fear my grandmother must have lived with every day. Her husband was not around most of the time. He was off doing things for the resistance and would be away for weeks at a time. And she had this growing brood of children. And, Germans knocking at the door every day to search the place or get a drink of water or take their food.
I mean, what courage.
Yeah. She must have been a very brave lady.
I think so.
Yeah. My own.
Because really, she was the one hiding the Jewish people. My grandfather wasn't there, so she was doing that part of it. She would, and I mean, had 2 or 3 times a week the SS would come and search, and they never found that false floor. And had they, probably everybody would have been shot on the spot.
For sure. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, it's funny about tyranny from age to age. It may be different, but it always has similarities, doesn't it?
Good. Sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have known people who have been under occupation in different countries and that, and my own father remembered the Black and Tans. He was born in 1912. He remembered the last of them, before they left. And, the tyrannies are very similar. My father remembered when they used to go around at night and people they suspected of being in the IRA at the time, they would throw the whole family out on the side of the road and burn the house down. And this they did at night for maximum effect, So they all had their little tricks,
Of
So,
course.
Yes, as I said, the thing I like about your book is that it almost puts you in the middle of it. Do you understand? You'd almost feel like you're there, and then you're given. You seem to get in the facts almost by osmosis. However, you seem to get in details of factual information as well. And it doesn't. You take it in. You put it in a poem, or a person I seem to take it in without even trying. Do you know what I mean? Whereas,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. In a very few words, you would say something like. You write a little poem about the food shortages, for instance, and your mother smuggling a bit of cow's tongue wrapped around her waist or something. And, it was just, you seem to get it across without making an effort on it, and how they used to hide the radio. If they were found with a radio, would that have meant they'd be shot or what?
I suspect that they probably would have been taken to a labor camp or else even, worse. I mean, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. I guess it would have depended on the SS officer, but certainly the consequences would have been grave.
Yeah, they wanted to stifle the information coming in from outside at all costs, so that nobody knew what was going on, you see. It's kind of a bit like the media these days. You don't want people knowing too much. Keep them left. So, we're nearly at the end of it. So, what I'll do is get you to round off with by the way, this lady runs marathons as well in her spare time, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I don't run marathons. That's not quite true. I run, but not marathons.
You're not? I saw you looking all hot and sweaty there one after one, and a number of pictures at some event you were at. I thought you were after running a marathon.
Oh, 10K is my maximum distance, but thank you for the flattery, James.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I was to flatter you, I'd tell them what a great looker you are as well. But anyway, we won't go there. We won't go there. I might get them too hot and bothered out there in Radio
you're
Land.
funny.
So perhaps if you read us 2 more of your choice.
Okay, I can do that. Let me see. Well, one of my favorites is The Red Boots, and the reason it's a favorite of mine is because it's really me imagining something between my mother and I that never happened, and it all came from the fact that I own a pair of red boots.
Right.
So here we go, The Red Boots. She has been waiting for days to show me the red boots, pulls me into the store. Smell the leather, my daughter cries, running her hands along the fine workmanship. I take the boot, bring it to my nose, feel the swell of memory, searing, burning my nostrils. I am back in my father's shoemaking shop in our small Dutch village, the tanned hides stacked one upon the other, disguising the hollow in the floor where we hid Jews. Smell of life, smell of death. Those who escaped, those who died trying, all the faces I can't remember. By them, I say, they make such a statement, but she can't possibly know just what I mean.
Great stuff. Lovely. And
another one, let me see. How about The Cat Got Your Tongue, it's called.
Yeah, I remember that one.
This is about my mother's best friend from childhood. The cat got your tongue? She'd come with bruises and excuses. Her name was Geisha, and she was my best friend at school. Mother dead, father and brother to care for her and her sister. And care they did. It was wartime, everyone taking what wasn't theirs, so they took her too. When social services got wind, they put her in a foster home. I saw her 40 years later on my first trip home. We cried, didn't have anything to say. Too many words, no tongue to find them. Her name was Geisha, and she was my best friend.
Lovely, lovely.
Oh.
Again, things that are poignant, you know, they come across very poignant. And have you anything you want to ask Carolyne, Jimmy, before?
I know. that was just brilliant. Thanks very, very much for sharing those stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very flattered and delighted to be a part of your show.
And I'll try to describe you to the listeners. You're a tall, blonde, willowy, good-looking gal. So there you go.
Thank you, James. You continue to be a charmer.
And certainly...
He's got the gift, all right.
I only speak the truth. But,
thank you so much.
Look, and thank you very much for coming on, Carolyne. Sorry about the confusion there at the start.
Me too. My apologies as well.
We might have you on another day. You never know. Stranger things have happened.
Would love that. Anytime.
We'll keep in touch. It's been super. And congratulations on the book. Really impressive. And
thank you.
It's most unusual book and done in a most unusual manner. And it really comes out very well. It really gelled the whole lot of it. So well done. So that's it. Thank you very much indeed. Please God, we'll be talking again.
All right.
Take care of yourself and be well.
Thank you. You too. Right? And we'll keep in touch.
Indeed we will.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, Jimmy.
No.
So what do you think of that?
Wow.
Yeah. Remarkable lady.
Honest to God. And that's a very, very famous writer, is it?
Which?
She's a very, very famous writer.
I don't know how famous she is, but she
will
be. She will be. She's well known in some circles anyway. Certainly she's on the internet a bit anyway. She's well known in a number of circles. She'd be a well known journalist more so. But she's in public relations.